Good evening and welcome to God Health, presented by Dr. Milton Mills. I am Christopher Nelson, and this is my wife, Sherry, and we are from the series Seventh-day Adventist Christian Church. We are happy to bring to you this informative and timely health presentation, which is the first in a series of health topics that we will be bringing to you. The next event will be a cooking school with Chef G.W. Chu on Tuesday, January 5th, 2021. You don't want to miss that. Because of what 2020 brought to us, namely COVID-19 and social unrest, some of our church members, myself, Sherry, Pastor Earl Canton, Coda Howe, Nate Willis, Mary Evelyn Johnson, and Pam Carter from the series Patterson and Modesto Westside Seventh-day Adventist Christian Churches wanted to help our communities in the area of health awareness. Our goal is to help our communities combat at least one big enemy, disease. We want to thank our pastors, Ted Bays and Jonathan Sanchez from the series Patterson SDA Christian Churches, and Pastor Earl Canson Jr. from the Modesto Westside Christian Church for their fellowship and support, along with Kara Clares, the Secretary and Health Ministry Leader at the series church. We also want to thank the NAACP, the Stanislaus County Branch, Unit 1048, the Executive Board, namely our President, Wendy Bird, and the Health Chair, Connie Gustafson, for collaborating with us for this event.
The NAACP is a nonpartisan organization that was established in 1909, fighting for the civil rights of those who are disenfranchised and discriminated against. Many people probably don't know that the Seventh-day Adventist Christian Church founders were abolitionists in the mid-1800s and were called the Moral Crusaders against slavery. We are glad to be working together with the NAACP for the health of our community. Following the presentation, we will have a brief question and answer time with Dr. Mills, so you want to make sure you stay tuned. We also have a limited number of gift giveaways from the NAACP to those who are local to the area. We will provide information about this at the end of the presentation as well. We are so excited to hear from Dr. Milton Mills tonight. Dr. Mills is a graduate from Stanford School of Medicine and completed his residency training at UCSF, Fresno, and Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. He has published several research journal articles dealing with racial bias in federal nutrition policy. He is a critical care physician in Washington, D.C., who appeared in What the Health documentary and is a renowned health lecturer. Let us pray before we begin and ask the Lord Jesus to bless our night and the presentation. The senior pastor of the series in Patterson SDA Churches, Ted Bays, will pray for us at this time. Pastor Bays.
All right, thank you, Sherry and Chris. Really appreciate your being here and introducing this. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Father, thank you so much for the way you have created us. We thank you that we can come here tonight and just experience and understand more of what you want for us. We thank you for Dr. Mills. We thank you that he's able to be here with us. We ask that you will bless him as he presents to us. We thank you that we can be here in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Okay, so is it time for me to take over? Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to the Series Church for the honor of presenting to you tonight. It is always a privilege and an honor to be asked to spread God's truth. And I pray that everyone will be blessed by the information presented this evening. And I want to thank Sherry and Chris for that very, very nice introduction. And I hope I live up to your expectations. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in because we have a lot of information to cover tonight. And I want everyone who's listening to understand that it's obvious that there's no way that we can cover all of what's important and relevant for our health in one meeting or one setting. So what we are going to do tonight is to try and do an overview of just why God has encouraged us to be plant-based and the benefits that flow from a plant-based diet and lifestyle. And there are a number of resources that we can refer the listeners to get additional information that goes into much more detail on many of these very, very important topics and on specific diseases. So without further ado, I'm going to try and make sure that I can hit the share screen and share. And you guys should all be looking at a grid of slides. Is that correct? All right, very good. Now I'm going to hit that, and you should all see a large blue screen, correct? Okay, all right. Let's, as they say, let's get the spirit and get moving. Okay. Well, first, I want to just do a little overview about Bible truth. And now we've all had the experience of filling out cards or messages online where they tell you at the outfront, you've got 200 or 300 characters that you can fit in this space. And once you use up those characters, you got to stop typing. And if you don't, the computer will stop for you. And when you confront a situation like that, we all realize, man, I've got to make every word that I write in this space count. Well, God faced a similar issue when he decided what he would include in his holy word, the Bible. John 21:25 tells us that the world itself wouldn't be large enough to contain all of the books that would have to be written if they were going to give us a full account of everything that Jesus did in his life. Psalms 40 verse 5 says, God's works and thoughts are more than can be numbered or told. So clearly, God, we serve an infinite God. There is so much more to God that can be put within the pages of a finite book. So therefore, what God decided to put it in his Bible was chosen very carefully. That means that every single word is important, and that the Bible, the truths it imparts are important not only for what they tell us, but for how they tell it to us. And one of the things that I want everyone to just kind of stop and think about is the fact that the Bible talks to us a lot about food. When you read the Bible carefully, you see that food was central to and important to in our relationship with God, both before and after the fall from grace. And arguably, it is even more important since we fell from grace because of the change in the nature of our relationship with God. So what is key is that God instructed human beings to be strictly plant-based both before we fell. Genesis 1:29, after he created Adam and Eve, he told them what to eat. He gave them a entirely plant-based diet, but at that point, it was a largely fruit-based diet. But then after sin entered the world, God enlarged their diet to include what the Bible refers to as the plants of the field, which we can think of as vegetables, grains, legumes, root vegetables, and so forth. That's Genesis 3:18. The Bible is trying to teach us that the act of eating has spiritual power and consequences. Eating and food move the foundations of our souls in ways that I don't think we truly fully understand. But the bottom line is that when eating is done the right way, it facilitates the process of sanctification. However, when it is done the wrong way, it is a prelude and a pathway to sin and degradation. And that's why we are told over and over, the children of Israel or some other entity sat down to eat and drink and then rose up and did something wrong. And it's because the food that they ate affected their spiritual perception, their ability to communicate with God, and the ability of God's Spirit to control their thoughts and actions. So we are clearly designed by God to be plant-based. God tells us again, when he created humans, he told us what to eat, and that was a diet entirely based on plants, Genesis 1:29. But then after humans sinned and God had to change his creation, he did enlarge our diet. But what did he enlarge it to include? Genesis 3:18 says the plants of the field. And what is interesting is, why did God modify the human diet? Well, in Genesis 3:22 and 23, God and his son are talking, and they say, we have got to put these humans out of the garden, lest they continue to eat from the fruit of the tree of life and be eternally living sinners. And there's a huge amount to unpack there that we simply don't have time to go to in this message. But the bottom line is, number one, God only has immortality. Nothing in the universe is immortal aside from God. And even in our perfect state, the way that humans would continue to live forever was by eating from the fruit of the tree of life, which had within it the power to perpetuate life indefinitely. And we can infer from that its fruit had within it the nutrients and compounds that help rebuild and restore and replenish our bodies. And since God was now going to prohibit humans from eating that fruit, he partially replaced some of the nutrients that we would no longer be getting from the fruit of the tree of life with the vegetables and the legumes and the grains and the root vegetables, which we know are very high in antioxidants, phytonutrients, protein, much more so than plain fruit. So that's why he modified our diet. Well, when did God give humans permission to eat meat? We are first told that humans were given permission to eat animals after the flood. And it, again, can be inferred that, number one, that was meant to be a temporary provision because all of the vegetation had been destroyed by the flood, which, again, was why the clean animals were taken into the arks by sevens. The unclean were only taken in by twos. That everybody has this notion that animals went in by twos. No, the unclean went in by twos. The clean ones went in by sevens. And that was to provide food until the earth replenished itself. Well, you say, wait a minute, Dr. Mills, you're just making this up as you go along. How on earth do you know this? Well, let's look what God decided to feed his people with when he had complete control over their diet. After God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, what did he feed them with? Manna. We're told in Psalms that manna was the grain of heaven. In fact, it was likened to angels' food. But it was then that the children of Israel, because of the hardness of their heart, started demanding flesh. We're told this in Numbers chapter 11. And God, in his wrath, but mingled with mercy, sent them a flock of quails into the camp so that they could have the flesh that they were demanding, although some of them did choke to death while they were eating it. And that's when he gave the Levitical rules about what was acceptable in terms of eating animals and what was not acceptable. But he also, interestingly, gave rules about how that flesh was to be cooked. The flesh was supposed to be boiled. It was supposed to have the blood drained from it. And again, I don't have time to go into this tonight, but all of those measures that he gave about the way that they were going to cook that animal flesh would markedly reduce the likelihood that it would cause cancer and other diseases by getting the heme iron out of it, by preventing the formation of these heterocyclic amines which are formed during roasting and frying and cooking at high temperatures. But again, another lecture for another time. So the question is, does permission mean that it's God's desire that we do this? And the answer, again, is no. God says many times he will give us permission because we tend to be stubborn and hard-headed, but it's very clear from the beginning to the end of the Bible that we were created to be plant eaters. We're told in the book of Daniel that when we adhere to that diet, we will be healthier, we will have more agile minds, we will be stronger. And clearly, modern science supports this view that a plant-based diet is the diet that promotes the greatest longevity, the lowest disease risk, and the lowest risk for dementia for human beings. And so this is our natural diet. It is the diet that God desires us to eat. And I got a spoiler alert. If you're planning to go to heaven, guess what? Ain't no fried chicken there. There will be no death, no killing, no slaughtering of animals. Everybody and everything, as we're told in the 11th chapter of Isaiah, will once again be plant-based as God created it in Genesis. All right. So with that, we're going to get started into the body of our presentation. And this lecture is going to cover the unique benefits of a plant-based diet. And I always start all of my lectures off with a quote from God's word. This is, again, from the book of Psalms. It says, God rained down on them manna to eat and gave them the grain of heaven. Psalms 78:24. Well, science has shown conclusively that plant-based diets are associated with less heart disease and over 50% reduction in all-cause cancer mortality, lower blood pressure, less osteoporosis both before and after menopause, a reduced risk of stroke, less obesity, less chronic disease in general, a decreased incidence of both type 1 and type 2 diabetes, greater overall longevity, lower risk of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, improved fertility, and a lower risk for erectile dysfunction, better immune system dysfunction, which is critically important in this age of COVID, an increased level of energy and greater functional capacity. People who are plant-based remain more active and more functional and have less of disability as they age, and higher levels of natural antioxidants in the diet, which slows the ravages of aging, a greater sense of well-being and reduced risk of depression, anxiety, and other behavioral and mood disorders, and of course, a reduced impact on our planet. Well, again, everything starts with the plants, and even God's creation, the plants were the first things he created. And plants literally conjure the stuff of life out of thin air. Using nothing but sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, plants manufacture the sugars that give our world its structure, shape, and energy. And only plants working in concert with bacteria can take nitrogen, one of the most inert substances on our planet, out of the air that we breathe and transform it into a chemically reduced form that allows it to be incorporated into the amino acids that make up the proteins, which make up the tissues of all living things. So how does this process get started? So carbohydrates are plant-derived compounds made up of literally carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So plants take carbon dioxide, combine it with water under the action of the sun, and form these sugar molecules, either 5 or 6 carbon sugars. And the basic carbohydrate unit is the sugar molecule. Starches are literally just long chains of sugar molecules joined together. Now, what makes starch different from cellulose, which is like fiber, wood fiber, the fiber, indigestible fiber, and much of the plant foods that we eat is also made up of long chains of sugar molecules. But those sugar molecules in the cellulose are joined by what are called beta 1,4 bonds, which we don't have enzymes to break, which is why we can't digest them. But the starch is joined by what are called alpha 1,4 bonds, which we have enzymes that can tear that apart, and we can break it down into something that we can derive energy from. And the sugar backbones are what plants use as the starting points for their manufacture of amino acids, which then make up proteins. The nitrogen, as I said before, in amino acids comes from the nitrogen gas that is in the air, which is one of the most inert substances known to man. Only plants can take this nitrogen and convert it into a form that can be turned into amino acids and then into proteins. So the important point that I want everybody to understand is that all protein is initially made by plants. Any protein you get from an animal source is recycled plant protein. No animal on this earth can make an amino acid de novo from just the elements carbon, oxygen, water, and nitrogen. Only plants can do that. And if all the plants on the earth died out, very soon all life on this earth would follow suit and die out. So again, all animal protein is nothing but recycled plant protein. And I would strongly urge you to cut out the middleman, and which would mean that you would cut out all of the cholesterol, the fat, toxins that come with animal protein, and get your protein directly from plant sources, which is where it is made initially. So what are some plant protein sources? Well, I've divided them into what I call the concentrated groups and the more dilute groups. Your concentrated sources of plant protein are your legumes, which are beans, peas, lentils, your grains, corn, wheat, barley, oats, things made from grains like seitan, breads, etc. Your nuts, seeds, tofu, tempeh, which are really ground up soybeans, and then man-made products like textured vegetable protein, which are generally made from either soybeans or some other legume and turned into a form that can be made into burgers, patties, and so forth. Your less concentrated forms of plant proteins are your vegetables and your root vegetables. So your broccoli, Brussels sprouts, other cruciferous vegetables, potatoes, and other root vegetables, asparagus, artichokes, green leafy vegetables, and fresh and dried fruits. So as you can see here, this just gives you some nutrient breakdown of a number of different beans. And you can see that they are loaded with protein, but unlike the animal tissue, in addition to the protein, they have fiber, they have a host of other nutrients and phytochemicals, they have antioxidants, they have all sorts of things which help build up your body. Beans are loaded with a compound called phytates, and phytates have a very powerful anti-cancer effect in our bodies and help prevent us from getting cancers and other diseases. So again, beans are some of the most nutritious things that you can possibly eat. And just to give you an idea of just how powerful beans are, if I ask you to imagine the nastiest, vilest substance you could stick your hand or a body part into, it would probably be some combination of fresh manure and dirt. Nobody wants to put their hand in that because that's just gross, it's nasty, and you expect to come out with a disease. Well, what happens if you push a bean into a combination of fresh manure and dirt? You get a perfect, beautiful plant. That's how powerful these things are. And here are some more beans, again, with their nutrient breakdown. And for those listening, because this is being taped, you will be able to go back and get this information. So don't worry about trying to copy this stuff down right now. And I will say, in general, I'm going to move through this material rather quickly to try to get through everything. And there will be a lot more information that you can necessarily take down in one sitting. But that's the beauty of having this taped, that you can go back and use this as a reference source and glean additional material from it as you review it over and over. And here are some nuts and seeds and their nutrient profile. And again, this is per 100 grams. And again, you can see loaded with protein, lots of other nutrients, incredibly healthy for you. Take a look at the Brazil nuts, and you can see Brazil nuts, just literally 3 Brazil nuts have all of the selenium you would need for at least a week or more. They are the highest source of selenium in the diet. But all of these seeds and nuts are, again, loaded with a number of really potent and powerful nutrients. Now I'm going to show you a short video from the nutritionfacts.org series by Dr. Michael Greger.
All nutrients come from the sun or the soil. Vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin, is created when the skin is exposed to sunlight. Everything else comes from the ground. Minerals originate from the earth, and vitamins from the plants and microorganisms that grow from it. The calcium in the cow's milk, 200-pound skeleton, came from all the plants she ate, which drew it up from the soil. We can cut out the middle moo, though, and get calcium from the plants directly. Where do you get your protein? Protein contains essential amino acids, meaning our bodies can't make them, and so are essential to get from our diet. But other animals don't make them either. All essential amino acids originate from plants and microbes, and all plant proteins have all essential amino acids. The only truly incomplete protein in the food supply is gelatin, which is missing the amino acid tryptophan. So the only protein source that you couldn't live on is Jell-O. As I covered previously, those eating plant-based diets average about twice the average requirement for protein. Those who don't know where to get protein on a plant-based diet don't know beans. Get it? That's protein quantity, though. What about protein quality? The concept that plant protein was inferior to animal protein arose from studies performed on rodents more than a century ago. Scientists found that infant rats don't grow as well on plants, but infant rats don't grow as well on human breast milk either. So does that mean we shouldn't breastfeed our babies? Ridiculous. They're rats. Rat milk has 10 times more protein than human milk because rats grow about 10 times faster than human infants. It's true that some plant proteins are relatively low in certain essential amino acids. So about 40 years ago, the myth of protein combining came into vogue. Literally, the February 75 issue of Vogue magazine. The concept was that we needed to eat complementary proteins together, for example, rice and beans, to make up for their relative shortfalls. This fallacy was refuted decades ago. The myth that plant proteins are incomplete, that plant proteins aren't as good, that one has to combine proteins at meals, these have all been dismissed by the nutrition community as myths decades ago. But many in medicine evidently didn't get the memo. Dr. John McDougall called out the American Heart Association for a 2001 publication that questioned the completeness of plant proteins. Thankfully, though, they changed and acknowledge now that plant proteins can provide all the essential amino acids. No need to combine complementary proteins. Turns out our body is not stupid. It maintains pools of free amino acids that can be used to do all the complementing for us. Not to mention the massive protein recycling program our body has. Some 90 grams of protein is dumped into the digestive tract every day from our own body to get broken back down and reassembled, so our body can mix and match amino acids to whatever proportions we need, whatever we eat, making it practically impossible to even design a diet of whole plant foods that's sufficient in calories but deficient in protein. Thus, plant-based consumers do not need to be at all concerned about amino acid imbalances from the plant proteins that make up our usual diets.
All right. So important things to know. Number one, your body cannot store protein. So any amount of protein that you eat on a given day that you don't use as protein gets converted into carbohydrate. So there is no advantage into eating high protein diets or huge amounts of protein because you can't store it as protein. All protein that's not utilized as protein is stripped of its nitrogen and sulfur and turned into carbohydrate. So it makes, I apologize, everyone, this happened the other day, and all I can say is the devil's kind of busy. All right. Animal proteins are not buffered. Therefore, the sulfur that comes off in animal protein comes off as a weak acid, sulfurous acid. And in the process of treating that acid, our kidneys lose the ability to retain calcium. That calcium gets lost in the urine. That's one reason that high meat diets predispose to kidney stones, because of all the calcium going through your kidneys. But it's also why high protein animal food-based diets are associated with higher risk for osteoporosis and weak bones. When you look worldwide, those countries that eat the most animal protein have the highest incidence of osteoporosis and weak bones. Plant proteins, by contrast, are buffered by phosphate. They don't cause excess acid production or calcium loss. And studies have shown, again, time and again, that women who are plant-based have stronger bones both before and after menopause than women who eat meat. So what are some of the major determinants of protein utilization? Of course, it's making sure you get an adequate protein intake, but that's easy to do because each of us needs only about 0.5 to 0.8 grams per kilogram of our body weight. And even people who are entirely plant-based get at least twice that every day. So we have quite a safety margin in our usual diet. We don't have to take in protein powders or protein supplements. Just eating a healthy diet that gives you enough calories will give you more than enough protein. Again, you want to make sure you have adequate energy intake, so that because if you are not taking in enough energy, your body's going to burn that protein you take in for energy instead of using it to build up your body. And that over time can lead to a deficiency. And you want to, of course, make sure you have an adequate intake of the essential amino acids. But again, that's nothing you have to worry about. If you're eating a healthy, balanced plant-based diet, you will get plenty of all of the essential amino acids. So strict protein complementing, which I learned when I was coming up back in the 70s, is absolutely not necessary at all. And remaining active and exercising on a regular basis helps our body utilize its protein more efficiently. So why are proteins important? Proteins are important because human tissues and the tissues of all living things are made up of protein. So the purpose of protein is not for energy. It is to build tissues. And you can see that all of these various tissues, skin, the sclera, which is the white part of the eye, the cornea, which is the clear part of the eye, the hair that make up the eyelashes or the hair on our head, the cartilage that's in our nose, all of these things are made up of different types of protein. And that's what makes protein so amazing, is that these 20 amino acids can be combined in such a way that they can form all of these amazingly different types of tissues. So I want you to think of protein needs the way you would think of building materials if you were building a house, because building a body is like building a home, and your proteins are your building materials. So again, if you're starting off with building just one house, then you're going to need only a limited amount of material delivered to your work site every day. However, if, as we see at this work site, you're building a whole neighborhood and multiple homes, well, you need a lot more materials delivered on a daily basis. What is my point here? My point is human beings are the slowest growing animal on the planet. No other animal takes 20 years to reach maturity. As a result, we don't need a lot of protein in our diet. And as Dr. Greger mentioned previously, human breast milk has the lowest protein concentration of any mammalian milk because we are the slowest growing. So we don't need huge amounts of protein. And if you deliver huge amounts of proteins to the human body, we can't use it. It'll simply be converted into carbohydrate. So next, you need to deliver your building materials at the rate they're being utilized. So the reason baby birds and baby rats and these other animals need much higher levels of protein when they're babies is because they are growing much faster than we are. But we are very slow growing, so we don't need large amounts of protein. I'm going to show you a chart in a little bit that's going to compare the milks of various mammals. And you'll see even when we compare human milk to another plant eater like a cow, we still have much less protein in our milk than the cow because cows grow 2 or 3 times as fast as we do. A baby cow goes from birth weight to adult size in 3 years if it's allowed to live. Again, for a human being, that takes 18 to 20 years. So we need much less protein. Well, once you've built your house, you don't need to continue delivering building materials at the same rate you did when you were building it. And so adult bodies do not need large amounts of protein because, again, once an animal is mature, you only need enough protein to replace any damaged tissue, to replace normal wear and tear in your body, but you're not trying to, grow another foot. You're not trying to, grow another arm or leg, so you don't need huge amounts of protein. Well, what happens if once your building is complete, you still continue delivering protein? Well, you end up with a pile of rubble. And an organic pile of rubble is a tumor. And this is one of the reasons that high protein diets have been shown to be associated with tumor development and cancer. And this is part of the reason that there are so many people with lipomas and cysts and fibroids and tumors in the breast, cysts in the skin or the prostate. And those tumors can be benign, or they can actually turn, frankly, cancerous. And again, research shows that high protein diets, especially animal protein, are associated with the development of cancer, such as liver cancer, kidney cancer, colon cancer, which we just had another very young African-American star die from, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and so on. So this cartoon says, the new food labels are a bit more candid, but hey, don't let that scare you. Just says, prepare to die if you eat this stuff. Well, traditional Western nutrition dogma has said animal protein was high quality because it's close in composition to human flesh, which is, when you stop to think about it, is very backwards reasoning. It grows out of the faulty assumption that it is a priori best to consume proteins that have a similar composition to your own tissues. Well, somebody needs to tell that to the elephant, because they grow to be the largest terrestrial mammal on this planet, eating nothing but plants. The logical extension of this idea that you have to eat protein that's close to you in order to build protein is cannibalism, because why should I eat an egg when I can eat another human? The largest, strongest animals on the planet are all strict plant eaters, so it is not necessary to eat flesh to make flesh. We need to get rid of that idea. And furthermore, cow, pig, chicken, and fish flesh is not human flesh. So that's not getting you where you need to be in the first place. The best human flesh is made by providing our bodies with adequate and appropriate amino acids, adequate energy intake from the most healthful protein and plant food sources. Aggregate medical research suggests that plant proteins promote the best overall health for all human beings. On the other hand, animal protein has been linked to a number of health problems, including heart disease, cancers of the prostate, breast, colon, pancreas, and other tissues. It's been linked to diabetes, both type 1 and type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, prion diseases like mad cow disease, Alzheimer's and other types of dementias, high blood pressure, stroke, the exacerbation and acceleration of kidney disease and kidney failure, kidney stones, dysentery, and other foodborne illnesses. Both meat and dairy protein is a very potent cancer promoter in non-nursing humans. Studies show that putrefaction of animal protein in the human colon releases toxins that can exacerbate attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and other mood and behavioral disorders. The amino acid composition of animal protein raises blood levels of a toxic compound called homocysteine, which can damage blood vessels and weaken our bones and lead to osteoporosis, dementia, and heart disease. Plant proteins do not raise homocysteine levels. Homocysteine has been shown to damage human blood vessels and, as I said, increase the risk for all of these problems. Well, clearly, getting the wrong signal can lead to complete disaster. So let me ask all of you, what is the natural diet for these animals that I'm showing you? Well, everybody's probably saying, well, duh, Dr. Mills, it's plant foods. Well, yeah, so then let me ask you, at what point in these animals' lives do they eat animal protein? Now, a lot of people are going to say they don't. And then I'm going to tell you, think again. think a little harder. At what point in their lives do they eat animal protein? It is when they are babies and they are drinking their mother's milk, which is loaded with animal protein. And that's important because what it means is that animal protein is a growth signal and growth stimulant in plant-eating animals. Whenever an animal that is a plant eater sees animal protein being ingested, it interprets that as a signal to grow. Well, that's fine if you're a baby and you need to, increase in size, increase in weight, and put on about 2 or 3, 4 or 5 feet in stature. But if you're an adult and you start signaling your cells to try and grow, they have no place to go except to start forming tumors. And this has been shown again over and over in research. There are a certain set of genes called mTOR genes. And TOR actually stands for target of rapamycin, which is a compound that was discovered when they were doing research. But these TOR genes function as master regulatory genes for cell proliferation and growth. Normally, those genes should only be active during the rapid growth phase of infant animals and young animals. So animal intake in and of itself increases this TOR activity. And it turns out it is the essential amino acid leucine that has the greatest stimulatory effect on TOR expression and activity. And one of the reasons nutrition researchers used to think that plant proteins weren't as effective or as efficient or as good quality as animal proteins is because plant proteins, as I will show you shortly, have less leucine than animal tissue, than dairy foods, and so forth. But again, that is by God's design because they have enough leucine to keep you healthy, but not enough to turn on growth genes, which in adults turn into cancer genes. Decreasing animal protein intake decreases TOR activity and will suppress another hormone called insulin-like growth factor 1. IGF-1 is also something that has been shown to promote cancer development. Cancer research shows that TOR genes are upregulated in human cancers, and cancer cells are also covered with these IGF-1 receptors so that when they see this IGF-1, it stimulates them to proliferate and grow. IGF-1 levels were shown to be 9 to 13% lower in vegan men and women when compared to meat eaters and even lacto-ovo vegetarians. People with higher animal protein intake had a 75% higher overall mortality and a 4-fold increase in cancer death in a study that lasted 18 years. This was a huge study, and so its results were very definitive in showing the relationship between animal protein and cancer development, but not just cancer development, but overall premature death. So this has been conclusively shown by science, and we can ignore the science, but we do so at our own risk. So let's look at the amount of leucine in different plant foods and different types of animal tissue. And to be honest, on the animal side of this equation, although these are things that humans normally eat, really the only thing that could be thought of as a food is the dairy, because dairy is meant to be food for young mammals. But human beings as adults should not be drinking the dairy products from another species to begin with. The reason eggs have a lot of leucine is because eggs are supposed to make new baby birds. And the reason you find high levels of leucine in animal tissues is because that's the animal's body. But I'm sure if you spoke to that chicken or that cow before you killed it, they would say, I don't consider myself to be food. But look at the plants. There's enough leucine in the plant foods to keep us healthy, provide what we need to keep our bodies functioning, but not so much it's going to turn on those cancer genes. That is why animal foods promote cancer. TOR genes are upregulated in human cancer. Again, leucine has the greatest effect in this regard. Animal proteins increase both TOR expression and IGF-1 levels because everything that is absorbed from your GI tract passes through your liver. When your liver sees animal protein, it starts pumping out IGF-1 in greater levels. Animal proteins also have higher content of the sulfur-containing amino acid methionine, which also has been shown to promote cancer development, but it also accelerates the aging and oxidation of your mitochondria, which will move your cells towards aging and cell death and cause your overall aging to be accelerated. Again, animal protein accelerates kidney damage, increases heart disease, diabetes, peripheral vascular disease, inflammation, bone loss, leading to osteoporosis. So this is the chart that I told you about, just to kind of show you briefly the differences in these various milks. At the top, you see a number of different carnivores, and at the bottom, you see the two plant eaters, cows and humans. And what you see across the board is that when you look at the amount of protein in the carnivore milks, they're many, many times what you find in either cows or humans. Well, why is that? Well, you've all seen baby kittens and baby puppies. Carnivore babies are born at a very immature state. They actually complete their development outside the womb. So they are growing phenomenally fast relative to, say, a baby cow or a baby human, and therefore they need more building blocks. They need more building materials. That's why they need all of this protein. They also have a lot more fat in their milk. And again, fat serves as a source of energy. And again, because they are growing so fast, they need all that extra fat. But let's skip down and look at the cow and the human, the two plant eaters. What is interesting is that total number of solids, roughly the same. Even the percentage of fat in the human milk compared to the cow's milk is actually the same, or even just a skosh more. So human breast milk is actually very high in fat. But the key thing to note is that that fat is completely different from the fat you find in cow's milk, which is why you can churn butter and make ice cream with cow's milk, but you can't do that with human breast milk. I'm sure most of the people listening to this lecture have seen human breast milk, and it has a thin, translucent look to it. That's because the fat that's in human breast milk is unsaturated fat. It is in the form of oils. It is not that solid, saturated fat that forms these globules at room temperature, or will form cream that you can skim off the top. And that's important because a human baby's digestive tract is very small and very compact and does not have the capacity to handle plant foods with a lot of roughage. They need a much more concentrated energy source. And that's where some people have gotten into trouble by trying to turn babies and young infants into vegans or being plant-based when their digestive system isn't big enough or mature enough to handle it. Babies should be fed what God designed for them to eat, and that's their mother's milk. Okay. And even up until about age 2 or 3, very young children need a higher percentage of fat in their diet so they can get all the calories they need to grow, because the capacity of their GI system is so small. But again, that's a topic for another lecture. Let's move on to the protein, looking at the cow and the human. You see that the cow has more than twice as much, almost 3 times as much protein as the human breast milk. Why is that? Because I told you, a baby calf is about 60 to 80 pounds when it's born. By its 3rd birthday, it will weigh 1,500 pounds. So it's got to have enough protein to help it grow to that huge size in that relatively short period of time. Human beings are much slower growing. We don't need all that protein. But now let's look at the sugar content, which is the lactose. You can see that a human baby is on average 7 to 8 pounds when it's born. Baby calf is 10 times as big, yet a human breast milk has 1.5 times as much sugar as the cow's milk. Why is that? That's because the human brain uses nothing but sugar for its metabolism. And proportionately, the human baby's brain is the biggest of any in the animal kingdom, just like our brains proportionately are the largest of any living animal based on size. And so when you feed a baby cow's milk, you are in essence starving its brain of energy because it's not getting enough nutrition. But there are 1,001 other reasons why you shouldn't be giving babies cow's milk, but we don't have time to go into that right now. All right, this is another video from Dr. Greger.
Only about 1 in 10,000 people make it to be 100 years old. What's their secret? Well, in 1993, a major breakthrough in longevity research was published. A single genetic mutation that doubled the lifespan of a tiny roundworm. Instead of all being dead by 30 days, the mutants lived 60 days or longer. This lifespan extension was the largest yet reported in any organism. This Methuselah worm, medical marvel, is the equivalent of producing a healthy 200-year-old human. All because of a single mutation? That shouldn't happen. I mean, presumably aging is caused by multiple processes, many genes. How could just knocking out one gene double the lifespan? What is this aging gene anyway? This gene that so speeds up aging that if it's knocked out, the animals live twice as long. It's been called the Grim Reaper gene. What is it? It's the worm equivalent of the human IGF-1 receptor. And mutations of that same receptor in humans may help explain why some people live to be 100 and other people don't. So is it just the luck of the draw whether we got good genes or bad? No, we can turn on and off the expression of these genes depending on what we eat. 3 years ago, I profiled a remarkable series of experiments about IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, this cancer-promoting growth hormone released in excess amounts by our liver when we eat animal protein. So men and women who don't eat meat, egg white, or dairy proteins have significantly lower levels circulated within their bodies. Switching people to a plant-based diet can significantly lower IGF-1 levels within just 11 days markedly, improving the ability of women's bloodstreams to suppress breast cancer growth and then kill breast cancer cells off. Similarly, the blood serum of men on plant-based diets suppresses prostate cancer cell growth about 8 times better than before they changed their diet. This dramatic improvement in cancer defenses is, however, abolished if you add back just the amount of IGF-1 banished from their systems because they were eating and living healthier. This is one way to explain the low rates of cancer among plant-based populations. The drop in animal protein intake leads to a drop in IGF-1, which leads to a drop in cancer growth, an effect so powerful, Dr. Dean Ornish and colleagues appear to be able to reverse the progression of early-stage prostate cancer without chemosurgery or radiation, just a plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle changes. Now, when we're kids, we need growth hormones to grow. I mean, there's a rare genetic defect that causes severe IGF-1 deficiency, leading to a type of dwarfism, but also apparently makes you effectively cancer-proof. Not a single death from cancer in about 100 individuals with IGF-1 deficiency. How about 200 individuals? None developed cancer. See, most malignant tumors are covered in IGF-1 receptors, but if there's no IGF-1 around, then they may not be able to grow and spread. This may help explain why those eating low-carb diets appear to cut their lives short, but not just any low-carb diets, specifically those based on animal sources, whereas vegetable-based low-carb diets were associated with a lower risk of death. But look, low-carb diets are high in animal fat as well as animal protein. So how do we know it wasn't the saturated animal fat that was killing people off and had nothing to do with the protein? What we need is a study that just follows a few thousand people and their protein intakes for 20 years or so and just see who lives longest, who gets cancer, who doesn't. But there's never been a study like that until now. 6,000 men and women over age 50 from across the U.S. followed for 18 years, and those under age 65 with high protein intakes had a 75% increase in overall mortality and a 4-fold increase in the risk of dying from cancer. But not all proteins. These associations were either abolished or attenuated if the proteins were plant-derived, which all makes sense given the higher IGF-1 levels among those eating lots of protein. The sponsoring university sent out a press release with a memorable opening line, "That chicken wing you're eating could be as deadly as a cigarette," explaining that eating a diet rich in animal proteins during middle age makes you 4 times more likely to die from cancer than someone with a low protein diet, a mortality risk factor comparable to smoking cigarettes. And when they say low protein diet, what they actually mean is just getting the recommended amount of protein. Almost everyone's going to have a cancer cell or a precancerous cell in them at some point. The question is, does it progress? Said one of the lead researchers. That may depend on what we eat. The question is not whether a certain diet allows you to do well in the short term, one of the researchers noted, but can it help you survive to be 100? It wasn't just more deaths from cancer. Middle-aged people who eat lots of protein from animal sources were found to be more susceptible to early death in general. Crucially, the same did not apply to plant proteins like beans, and it wasn't the fat, but the animal protein that appeared to be the culprit. What was the response to the revelation that diets high in meat, eggs, and dairy could be harmful to health as smoking? Well, one nutrition scientist replied that it was potentially dangerous. It could damage the effectiveness of important public health messages. Why? Well, a smoker might think, hey, why bother quitting smoking if my ham and cheese sandwich is just as bad for me? It reminds me of a famous Philip Morris cigarette ad that tried to downplay the risk by saying, hey, you think secondhand smoke is bad, increasing the risk of lung cancer 19%. Well, hey, drinking 1 or 2 glasses of milk every day may be 3 times as bad, 62% increased risk of lung cancer, or doubling the risk frequently cooking with oil, or tripling your risk of heart disease eating non-vegetarian, or multiplying your risk 6-fold eating lots of meat and dairy. So they conclude, let's keep some perspective here. The risk of cancer from secondhand smoke may be well below that of other everyday activities, so breathe deep. It's like saying, yeah, don't worry about getting stabbed, because getting shot so much worse. It's like saying, if you don't wear seatbelts, might as well have unprotected sex. If you go bungee jumping, might as well disconnect your smoke alarms at home. 2 risks don't make a right. Of course, you'll note Philip Morris stopped throwing dairy under the bus once they purchased Kraft Foods.
All right. Well, when it comes to quality, clearly protein that injures your blood vessels, damages your heart and kidneys, weakens your bones, raises your blood pressure, and increases your risk of developing cancer, diabetes, or having a stroke is not high quality protein. And then there's also the fact that foods that are high in carnitine and choline and cholesterol increase something called TMAO, which stands for trimethylamine oxide, which when these compounds go into the colon, if you are on a meat-based diet, the kind of bacteria you have will convert those compounds into trimethylamine, which then goes to your liver, gets oxidized, and trimethylamine oxide, or TMAO, has been shown to increase the risk for stroke, cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. So again, it's just another way in which eating animal tissue harms our bodies. Well, let's talk briefly about what happens to the food we eat, and I want to talk about food retention time. So when you eat a meal and it stays in your body, where is it during that time? And I think we can say that the average amount of time a meal should stay in our body is about 14 hours. Now, some people will say, wait a minute, Dr. Mills, how the heck do I know how long a particular meal was in my body? Because everything that comes out looks pretty much the same. Okay, I'll spot you that. So this is what I want you to do. The next time you eat some whole kernel corn, look at your watch when you eat it, and then look at your watch when you see it again. That will be the retention time for that meal. It averages about 14 to 16 hours. Well, where is that food during all that time? It's usually in the stomach, maybe 2 to 3 hours. So if we start with, let's say, a 16-hour window, and we say we're going to subtract 3 hours, which is actually food is usually out of the stomach before 3 hours, but we'll say 3 hours. That means we still have 13 hours. Well, what about the small intestine? Everybody's small intestine is 30 to 35 feet long, but it turns out that a meal will pass through the entire length of your small intestine in less than 2 hours. So now we've accounted for 5 hours. So 5 from 16 leaves 11 hours. Where is the food the rest of the time? It is in your colon. And the human colon is extremely long for a mammal our size, and food spends the majority of its retained time in the colon. Well, why is that? It's because we are hindgut fermenters. Like horses, primates, elephants, humans have the GI anatomy of a hindgut fermenter. The long length and sacculated structure of our colon is typical of hindgut fermenters. The ascending portion of the colon acts like the cecum, whereas and as previously discussed, cellulose contains large amounts of energy that can be broken down, and we can by the bacteria in the colon or our microbiome, and then we can absorb it. But it's also converted into biologically active compounds that have a beneficial effect on our physiology. So our small intestine extracts the readily available nutrients in our food, passes the leftover fiber into the colon for fermentation. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of our gut microbiome for optimal health. And we can see that the microbiome has many, many wide-ranging effects, and they can be good or bad. Some of the good effects is that the microbes in our colon make neurotransmitters that can help beneficially affect the brain, help improve mood. They make compounds that can lower cholesterol, reduce the risk for a number of different cancers. However, if we're eating the wrong kinds of foods like this hamburger and these greasy fries, we actually end up making a lot of compounds that negatively affect our health. So the colon contains a population of bacteria that does a lot of really important things. They produce vitamins. They break down fiber into these bioactive compounds called short-chain fatty acids. We can extract energy from that, but they can also, again, affect our physiology in a beneficial way. They suppress pathogenic and gas-forming producing bacterial species, and they prevent the production of putrefactive toxins and toxic byproducts. The crypts in the colon create much more surface area for all of this activity to take place. So this is an example of what happens when we eat a nice, healthy, high fiber diet. One of the things that you see is you have a very thick layer of mucus in your colon, which lifts up the colonic contents away from the surface of your colonic cells. So it makes it much harder for pathogenic bacteria to invade into your bloodstream or for toxic compounds to be absorbed. The other thing that you'll notice here is that the colonic cells are maintaining very, very tight junctions between themselves. And that's because the bacteria are breaking down the fiber into a 4-carbon compound called butyrate. Butyrate is the preferred fuel source for colonic cells. When we have a lot of fiber, our colon makes a lot of butyrate. Our colonic cells are really happy and healthy, and they maintain very tight junctions. You don't get anything leaking in between them. And you also select for beneficial strains of bacteria that, again, crowd out the bad guys. But what happens when you don't have enough fiber? Well, when you don't have enough fiber, you see you don't have a thick layer of mucus. But more importantly, you don't have enough butyrate, and your colonic cells become very unhealthy, inflamed, and very weak, and they can't maintain tight connections. And so you start to get leakage of colonic contents in between those cells into your bloodstream. And that is truly leaky gut syndrome, where you get the leakage of these toxic compounds into your bloodstream, and that promotes inflammation and disease. Furthermore, when you have a diet that is very high in animal food and meat, you select for bacteria that promote these unhealthy types of interactions. And when you look at the bacterial makeup of the colon, the question is, should you be taking probiotics versus prebiotics? The short answer is this: probiotics can temporarily establish certain bacterial strains, but those are quickly washed out of your body. It is studies have shown it is much more important to take in prebiotics. What are prebiotics? Prebiotics are the plant fibers and compounds that the bacteria use to establish themselves, that they use for their energy production, and that is what will promote the healthiest population of bacteria in your colon. So don't waste your money on probiotics. Make sure you're eating a healthy plant-based diet, and you will have enough of these prebiotics. Non-digestible oligosaccharides and fructo oligosaccharides, in other words, plant fibers, vegetable, grain, fruit, and legume fibers are your prebiotics. These are the ones that will promote the best overall bacterial population. Plant-based diets have also been shown to support bacterial populations that crowd out hostile pathogenic species like E. coli, O157, which can cause hemolytic anemia and other problems. And they've also shown that in people eating large amounts of meat and other animal protein, they have a lot of putrefactive activity instead of fermentation, and that creates toxins that can negatively affect the person's brain, their mood, and so forth. Studies also show that bacterial fermentation of plant isoflavones and other phytochemicals generate very powerful anti-cancer metabolites that also have anti-inflammatory effects that protect us against prostate cancer, breast cancer, and other hormone-related cancers. So when it comes to fiber, there are many types, but there are two types, but many varieties of fiber. The two types are water-soluble fiber. These are the types of plant fiber that dissolve in water but aren't absorbed. And the poster vegetable for water-soluble fiber is okra. The reason okra has that slimy quality is that is the water-soluble component of it. But all sorts of plant foods have this water-soluble fiber, and it protects against heart disease, diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease, colitis, cancers, and so forth. Then you have your more well-known water-insoluble fibers, the celluloses, hemicelluloses. These are your bran fibers, again, found in a variety of different plant foods, and they protect against colon cancers, other cancers, constipation, diverticulosis, hemorrhoids, inflammation, and improve your immune function. And as I said before, higher levels of fiber and stimulate the production of these goblet cells that create a thicker layer of mucus that has antibodies and antibacterial compounds. But then you have your short chain fatty acids, the first of which is the butyrate that I mentioned. Butyrate is a 4-carbon short chain fatty acid, preferred fuel source for your colon cells, but it also has been shown to reduce the risk of colon cancer. It can be used to treat and prevent ulcerative colitis by aiding the healing of the colonic mucosa, and can help reduce the risk of spastic colon, and has an anti-cancer effect by increasing the differentiation of colonic cells so that they don't become cancerous. And we know that many of these effects are mediated through epigenetic effects on the DNA of colonic cells called hyperacetylation. In other words, the food that you're eating is actually modifying the DNA of your colon cells. The next short chain fatty acid is a 3-carbon short chain fatty acid called propionate. This is the true star of the short chain fatty acids. It helps control blood sugar by causing the liver to decrease its glucose production. That is the exact same way the medication glucophage works. But it also targets the enzyme HMA-CoA reductase. That is the rate-limiting enzyme in the production of cholesterol level. That is the target enzymes, a target enzyme for drugs like Lipitor, Zocor, Crestor. All of these drugs target this enzyme. Well, the fact is that if you're eating a high fiber diet, your body will make this propionate compound that will do the same thing, target that enzyme, decrease cholesterol production by your liver. And that's why you see that when people convert to a plant-based diet, they can get drops in their cholesterol level of over 100 points or more. And propionate has also been shown to decrease triglyceride levels, as well as increase HDL, which is the good protective form of cholesterol. And lastly, 2-carbon short-chain fatty acid is acetate, which our muscle cells can use instead of glucose, which means that our body glucose stores will last longer. So we don't get hungry as often, we don't eat as much, and that helps with weight control. The bacteria in our colon also activate these phytoestrogens and lignans in the plant foods that we eat. They've been shown to decrease breast cancer risk by up to 22% for women with the highest lignin intake. Whole grain rye decreased PSA in men with prostate cancer by 14%. Consumption of soy phytoestrogen reduces breast cancer or prostate cancer in men in a dose-dependent fashion, meaning the more you eat, the lower the risk. Metabolism of these phytoestrogen by specific bacterial strains also make them more bioavailable. And of course, those bacteria which are most effective at doing this are the ones associated with a plant-based diet. Because plant proteins are always accompanied by fiber, when they reach the colon, they aren't rotted like animal proteins. The bacteria use the leftover plant protein to make new bacteria, and they use the fiber for their energy. But because animal proteins have no fiber, the only thing the bacteria can do when animal protein residues get to the colon is putrefy them. And they break them down into a host of toxic compounds like hydroxyl sulfate, p-cresol sulfate, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia, which have been shown to, again, promote cancer, damage our blood vessels, promote heart disease, dementia, and a host of other problems. The putrefaction of leftover animal protein produces, again, ammonia, phenol, sulfides, hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide itself blocks colonic cells from utilizing this butyrate, which will make them more sickly, more likely to become leaky and promote leaky gut phenomenon and irritable bowel syndrome. And again, studies have shown consistently the cartoon says the bluebird of happiness, long absent from his life, Ned sadly is visited by the chicken of depression. Studies have shown over and over that diets that are plant-based reduce the risk of depression and other mood and anxiety disorders. Diets that are high in animal proteins, such as meat, dairy, and eggs, low in fiber, have a very detrimental effect on mood and behavioral disorders. And the negative impact of these diets is mediated through the toxic metabolites that are generated through the putrefactive action of bacterial fermentation of animal proteins in the colon. Other studies in animals and humans have shown that when you change to a plant-based diet, you can reverse that process. Now, this is just to touch on some issues in women's health, namely, many women find that when they go through menopause, they begin to have problems with anxiety and depression. And again, I am only touching on this in a very superficial way because this is such a complex and important topic. It deserves its own sort of presentation and series, but I just want to touch on this because it's something that I have seen again with my own mother and also with my patients in clinic. And this is the normal hormonal milieu that a woman goes through every month through most of her adult life. You can see that she's got this complex interplay of all these hormones, estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, FSH, and they, rise and fall in this complex rhythm. But when you get to these periods where that hormonal rhythm is interrupted, that's when women are at most risk for depression. So that's why women can have postpartum depression when suddenly, the levels of hormones plummet and their body is trying to readjust and they just find that they just don't feel normal. Or again, when they go through menopause and suddenly all of these hormone levels plummet to a very low level. This is what puts them at a risk for depression. And so it's something that should be understood so that women understand that what they're going through is not something they have to hide or feel ashamed about, but it's something that they should talk to someone about and can get help with. I will also say that being on a plant-based diet will help minimize these kinds of fluctuations and problems that women can have with this depression, but it may not abolish it entirely. Women are also more prone to issues with their thyroid and more susceptible to autoimmune disease in general. autoimmune diseases, importantly, are very responsive to being reversed with plant-based diets. This just shows that when they were looking at people with depression versus controls, people with major depression had much higher levels of inflammatory problems or inflammation in their body, as evidenced by antibodies to something called lipoprotein polysaccharide, which is a bacterial antigen. So again, these bacterial endotoxins, when they leak into the bloodstream because of an animal food-based diet, can markedly increase the amount of inflammation in the body, which is associated with depression. And inflammation and inflammatory mediators also alter blood-brain barrier permeability and have been shown to alter brain neurochemistry in detrimental ways. This is a slide I'm going to just kind of slide over very, very quickly. But the basic thing that I want you to take from this is you can see this neuron, the switch of this neuron, and the axon, which is the signal portion of the neuron, is wrapped with this insulation called myelin. And myelin is made by cells that are called oligodendrocytes. Well, studies have shown that diets that are high in animal food create toxic compounds that interfere with the production of these myelin sheaths, and they alter the chemistry in the brain in such a way that they make a person more susceptible to anxiety and depression. And the one compound that has been shown to do that is cresol, and another is hydrogen sulfide and ammonia. They actually interfere with the differentiation and of the cells that make the myelin and their ability to make the myelin. So again, the food that you eat can actually alter your brain chemistry in ways that will make you more susceptible to depression, anxiety, and other mood and behavior disorders. Clearly, one of the most frightening aspects of aging is contemplating the possibility that we will develop some form of dementia and lose our sense of who we are and our hold on those that we love. Projections are that as our population ages, dementias of all types will increase, and it is projected by the year 2050, the incidence of and prevalence of Alzheimer's disease will triple by that point. The good news is that dietary habits can significantly affect and potentially reduce the risk of developing several types of dementia. So this is just a chart showing you how much meat people eat around the world. The darker the areas, the more meat a country eats. So you can see United States, Western Europe, Australia, Argentina, some places in Africa, very high meat intake. Why is that important? It's important because when you look at the incidence of Alzheimer's disease, it is highest in those countries that have the highest animal food intake and lowest in those places where they have a more plant-based diet. So again, worldwide, Alzheimer's correlates with animal food intake. So risk factors include elevated cholesterol, homocysteine, hypertension, diabetes, smoking, habitual alcohol intake, and being overweight. Of course, most of these are the usual problems associated with an animal food-centered diet. And while genetics and family history can play a role in a small percentage of cases, clearly having a diet that predisposes you to this type of disease will create these problems. Research suggests that you can decrease your risk for Alzheimer's and other dementias by reducing the intake of saturated trans fats, animal protein, alcohol, maintaining a healthy weight, and stopping smoking. Fruits, vegetables, fruit and vegetable juices, antioxidants, vitamin C, E, exercise, and plant-sourced omega-3 fatty acids have all been shown to protect against this disease. I'm going to have to skip over this little video, but it will be in I'll send a copy of my slides to the church so that you guys will have this. But I'm already at the hour mark, and I want to try and finish. And basically, this says that it's not just the years that are important, it's the mileage we put on our body. Growing older does not mean that we are doomed to slowly fall apart. What's most important is not necessarily our chronological age, but the biological age of our cells. Successful aging entails growing older with minimal losses in physical abilities while retaining our physical and mental acumen. And by making appropriate dietary and lifestyle choices throughout our lives, we can ensure that we remain healthy and functional even in our later years. Those choices include adopting and adhering to a plant-based diet, avoiding the intemperate use of drugs and alcohol, and engaging in healthy levels of physical activity on a regular basis. Additional keys are good hydration, adequate sleep, adequate sun exposure, maintaining a healthy weight, and maintaining healthy social connections, and developing good coping mechanisms so that we don't resort to self-destructive means of trying to cope with problems, and of course, keeping your mind active as you age. Dr. Dean Ornish showed that after only 3 months on a plant-based diet, he could find increased telomerase activity. That's important because telomerase is the enzyme that increases the length of telomeres at the end of our DNA. And telomeres, the longer your telomeres are, the longer you live and the lower your risk for disease. So we're going to end by looking, touching on issues with our immune system. Our immune system is organized like our military. It has different branches that perform different functions. The generals can be thought of as the T cells. The T cells have the ability to recognize what is you versus what is not you. Every cell in your body has a unique set of proteins that identify these cells as part of you. And if a T cell comes along and finds a bacteria or a cell that's infected with a virus or something and it's expressing abnormal proteins, it starts to alert the immune system to respond to get rid of these foreign invaders. And it can signal B cells, which are the cells that make antibodies, to find a B cell that will make an antibody that will attach to and neutralize viruses. It also signals other cells like natural killer cells, macrophages, and neutrophils, which actually engulf and eat bacteria or damaged cells. And it also, these T cells also know when to tell our immune system, importantly, when to calm down and when to back off so that they don't become so revved up they start to attack our own tissues. Natural killer cells, neutrophils, and macrophages are like the foot soldiers and are the first and last line of defense. But this is where this is critically important. Our immune cells need vitamins, nutrients, and phytochemicals from our diet in order to do their jobs. So if we are not eating a healthy plant-based diet, it's like we have an army that has rifles that won't shoot. It's like we have an Air Force that has airplanes that don't have engines because they don't have what they need from the diet. And we have Navy ships that can't sail. We may have white blood cells, but those white blood cells cannot do their jobs because they don't have the nutrients and cofactors they should have gotten from our diet in order to do their job. And this has been shown very, very, very conclusively with COVID, in that when they've looked at people who have succumbed to COVID or who have not done as well with COVID infection, it has been people who have been low on some very important nutrients like D3, zinc, selenium, antioxidant vitamins like vitamin C and other important plant-based antioxidants. So it is critically important to give your body the best ability to ward off COVID infection and other types of viral infections and so forth. You have to have a healthy plant-based diet where your body is getting a continual source of these nutrients and phytochemicals to be able to fight off these foreign invaders. All right. It says, Dogbert, I don't understand why you or anybody else will become a vegetarian. He says, you mean, why don't I take dead animals, cook them until they become carcinogenic, then eat them instead of something nutritious? Is that your question? He says, exactly. Is there any good reason? Have you joined a cult? He says, well, I live in Loma Linda. And as those of you know, Loma Linda is where Adventists live. This is important because vegetarian Adventist men have been shown to live almost 10 years longer than non-average men, and that's an average, which means that many of them do much better than that. The women live 6.5 years longer, and that doesn't mean that being plant-based is less beneficial for women. It's just that women already outlive us by so much that there's less room for improvement. Adventist vegetarians have lower risk of colon, breast, prostate, stomach, and kidney cancers, lower risk of diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, the metabolic syndrome, and high cholesterol, and a lower risk of all-cause mortality. And I just want to quickly run through a couple of slides on exercise to show the importance of plant-based diets for diet and exercise. So this was a study where they put the people in the study on 3 different diets. The first diet was a diet that was all animal foods, fat and protein. Maximum amount of work time was 60 minutes. When they added in some carbohydrate, the exercise time doubled to 120 minutes. But when they put the athletes on a high carbohydrate diet, they tripled their workout time to 180 minutes. Well, what about muscle recovery? A variety of plant foods and vegetables have been shown to help preserve muscle mass conditioning in both adolescents and the elderly. And these fruits and vegetables have also been shown to improve recovery time from a bout of exercise. And the ones that have shown the most benefit in the studies: spinach, purple grape juice, black currants, other berries. But I think you can generally extend that to include all green leafy vegetables. All brightly colored fruits and vegetables will give you a similar benefits. Question: Can plant-based people put on muscle mass? Of course they can. It says grasses and leaves. Well, just look at them. These are some vegan Olympic athletes and bodybuilders showing that there's no problem in putting on muscle when you're eating plants, like the largest animals on this earth. This is Malachi Davis, who is a British 400-meter Olympic runner. These are all, everyone I'm showing you now are all total vegans. She's a soccer player. This is Joe Coleman, vegan bodybuilder. He lives in Oakland, California. This is Kendrick Ferris. He was on the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team. This is Mario Catley. He's another vegan bodybuilder based out of Oakland, California. Rebecca Soni, she was Olympic swimmer on the U.S. Olympic swim team. This is Namai Delgado, vegan bodybuilder. Namai's never eaten meat his entire life. This is Derek Treesize, another vegan bodybuilder, here along with his wife. Her picture's coming up next. Marcella, they are both vegan bodybuilders. And then Darcy Bosch is an Olympic silver medalist. She won the Olympic silver medal in the London Games at a much older age than anyone would have thought by becoming completely vegan. So I'm going to stop here because I know I'm well over time and I want to leave some time for questioning. And so I will come back and stop the share. But as I said, I will happily send all of these slides to the church so that you guys will have the full presentation and you can hopefully get additional information from it. And I hope this was a blessing to you guys. There's just always so much to go through and not nearly enough time to do it.
It was awesome.
Well, Dr. Mills, this was amazing. You really killed it.
Well, praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. That's all I can say. Praise the Lord.
Went through all of these different questions and things that people were thinking, things we didn't even talk about. Bodybuilding is always a big one. So you ended on that, and protein, just beautiful. Very, very nice, very encouraging. I know we will be looking at this presentation again. It was a lot of good information and we want to really digest it all. But thank you very, very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
We do have a few questions that we will just go through just a few. Someone wanted to know, how does oxygen restriction affect our frontal lobe, brain, etc.? And if it does, can this be reversed? So how does oxygen restriction?
That's an interesting question because I'm not sure what they mean by oxygen restriction. But in general, it's never good to limit our oxygen intake. Now, I would say, so again, not knowing what they mean by oxygen restriction, I can't really say what's reversible. I mean, I can try and make an inference. If, let's say, the person who was concerned about that was someone who felt that at some point their oxygen had been restricted. If they are with it enough aware enough and interactive enough to be concerned about it, then what I would say is that I don't think that they have likely suffered any severe permanent damage, and that just going forward, making sure that they are on a healthy, plant-based, low-fat diet. And one of the slides that I wasn't able to show tonight, it wasn't in this presentation, shows what happens to our blood when we eat a high-fat meal and how the blood sludges. And it doesn't, not only doesn't it move through our vessels cleanly or smoothly, but because oil and water don't mix, when we eat a lot of fat, it actually displaces part of the oxygen carrying capacity of our blood. So we're depriving our brains of oxygen in a couple of ways, which is one of the reasons when people eat these big, unhealthy, greasy meals, their brain gets so oxygen deprived, they get cranky and moody and sleepy because their brain just isn't getting supplied with enough oxygen. And, you know, the flip side of that is that the whole purpose of fasting is so that we have the maximum amount of blood supplied to our brain, which then allows us to hopefully communicate and interact with God and His Spirit as efficiently as possible. So in general, I would just say, whatever that person is concerned about, if they're able to be concerned about it, they likely have not suffered a permanent loss. And going forward, if they embrace that healthy diet, eat the right foods, that whatever they may have suffered from, they should recover from. Okay,
good. And one of the questions was, what are your thoughts on fasting? And you kind of mentioned that in that answer.
So that's fasting for spiritual purposes. There's also fasting as a way of losing weight, and intermittent fasting has been shown to be helpful in weight loss. But there's also fasting boosts our immune function as well. And there have actually been people who've been able to help augment disease treatment by embracing various forms of fasting. Yes, fasting can be very, very beneficial. I would just, encourage people to make sure that they're doing it in a healthful fashion. There's different kinds of fasting. There's intermittent fasting where you go for a 12 to 14 hour period on a regular basis without eating. So you'll say, I will only eat between, X hours, and then the remainder of the time I'm not going to eat, which is a type of fast. Then of course, there's the total fast where you're not eating anything. There's water fasting. You should always make sure you're staying hydrated if you're not eating. And then there's juice fasting. And if people want to do juice fasting, I would recommend a combination of vegetable and fruit juices, preferably as freshly squeezed as possible, because those will be, of course, the most nutritious. And then it's up to the person how long they want to do that. I like, some people would say do it for 48 hours or 72 hours. Some people will go for a week or more. It just depends on what your goals are and what you feel the Spirit is leading you to do.
Okay, great. I think we may make this our last question because Chef Chu is on and we want to introduce him. And then also Connie wants to share about our giveaways.
Oh, give my shout out to G for me though.
Okay, well,
that's my boy.
Just stay on. Okay, so someone asked, and this is a good one, with a plant-based diet, what vegetables are good for reducing stubborn belly fat? Person says they carry all of their fat around their waist, which I think most of us do.
Yes. Tell me about it. And that's a function of just kind of how our metabolism changes as we age. And I mean, I will be honest. I'm not an expert, and I wouldn't characterize myself as an expert in that field. But do you guys know who Chef AJ is? Chef AJ has a number of books that she's done on ways in which to reduce belly fat and just overall a healthy way to reduce body fat. And the general principles are you want to stay away from high glycemic index foods. So foods that are broken down and absorbed very quickly. So like processed carbs, things that have a lot of really high sugar content. If people want to include potatoes in their diet, I always encourage them to use the smaller potatoes that have colored skin. Because if you cut into a russet potato versus say a red potato or a small gold potato, the red potato and the gold potato has a waxier texture to it. That waxier texture is because it has a lot more soluble fiber in it. And that means that it has a better glycemic index. The russet potatoes are actually man-made. I mean, we've selectively bred those things. You cannot go into nature and find a russet potato. Potatoes just aren't that big and fat in nature. We've even bred our food to be obese. and it makes us obese. So yeah, you want to stay to the more whole foods, the foods that have more fiber, that will not only keep you full longer, but it will keep your body from having those high insulin spikes, which can promote the fat deposition and prevent you from burning fat. But like I said, Chef AJ has a lot of this material in her books, and I would encourage people to look her up and look her books up and get those, and they would be very, very helpful.
Okay, great. Well, good. Well, at this time, thank you so much again, and don't go anywhere because Chef Chu is on. We wanted to say to everybody, and Chris had mentioned it earlier, so on January 5th, 2021, we're going to have a cooking class with Chef Chu. So we've talked about and we've learned from you, Dr. Mills, what the best diet is, and now we want to learn, well, how do we implement this? How do we make it happen in our home? So anyway, so Chef Chu, if you want to come on and just kind of share just briefly.
Can I ask a quick question? That
Sure.
January program is he going to be in person or on Zoom?
It will be on Zoom.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is I'm actually going to be in the Bay Area on the 5th.
Okay.
I'm going. So maybe I'll just go over to Chu's house and hang out and bother him and make noise in the background.
Okay, that'll be great. He'll be in Ceres, so you can come to Ceres.
Oh, okay.
And,
all right.
So we can meet us all in person or see us all.
All right, cool. All right.
Okay, great. All right. Well, Chef Chu.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's definitely a blessing. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I want to say good evening, and I on that slide you had with those bodybuilders, Milton, I didn't see myself in those slides.
I'll fix that.
I was waiting to see the picture of me on there.
All right.
But yeah, so don't forget it next time. But good evening, everybody. Really happy to be here. We're excited on January 5th to be able to, my last name is CHEW, Chu. We're going to give you guys something to chew on. And as Dr. Mills shared today about just the principles of health and plant-based living, obviously we wanted it to taste good. If you can't, making a transition is obviously important, but you want to also enjoy it. And my job is to help you guys to recognize that eating healthy can be enjoyable. It can be tasty. It can be affordable. It can be delicious and be also simple to actually prepare as well. So we're going to be having some simple recipes. And one of the recipes I love doing is a 3-cheese mac and cheese, showing you guys how to make a delicious plant-based mac and cheese. And that recipe is really important because you're going to learn how to make a vegan cheese sauce. Obviously, we talked about the cholesterol, the fat, That's something that's super critical in learning how to actually replace something that we love the most is cheese, how to replace a healthier option. Also going to be doing a simple breakfast scramble, scrambled tofu, scrambled egg. That's going to be another simple recipe that we're going to be doing as well. Showing you guys how to take some simple ingredients, some plant-based ingredients like tofu, which is sometimes can be a bad four-letter word. Showing you guys how to make something like tofu actually taste pretty amazing. And we're going to show you guys some techniques on how to actually make those things properly. And we're going to do a few salad dressings and a few other things. And this, if you see some of the pictures on the screen, I actually also make my own plant-based proteins. So I make a delicious, we call it Better Chew. We make our own plant-based chicken, our own plant-based steak, and different products, also helping individuals to transition to a plant-based diet that's affordable and nutritious. So we'll be talking about all of that. I'm really excited to be a part of the team and be a part of this conversation on healthy lifestyle and how to make the best choices possible for longevity. So so I'm happy to be here. And again, my last name is Chew, and as I always like to say, as I always say, going to give you something to chew on.
Great.
That's outstanding.
Okay, wonderful. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you. We're looking forward to
Looking
that,
forward
I'm
to that,
sure.
and
Yes.
a double blessing with Dr. Mills will be in town as well. So that's awesome. We appreciate that. Thank you so much for the awesome presentation tonight.
Okay, so now Connie Gustafson from the NAACP, she has something to share with everybody. Connie, are you there?
Hi, can you hear
Oh,
me
there
now?
you go. Yeah, yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Mills and Chef Chu. What wonderful information. That was a lot of information, but I'm inspired, and that's big because I was liking to be the bad one eating my meat. But anyway, the NAACP wants to offer a limited number of some very special cookbooks. This is called the Vegan Soul Food. And we know that when we talk about food, we like to really see how we can actually make some food. So this cookbook has some delicious, delicious recipes for soul food. So if you would like a copy of this cookbook, please use is it the email address or something that's in our chat?
Yes, we'll put the email at, it's seriesadventist@sbcglobal.net. And so that'll go in the chat.
So, and we will provide you a copy as long as they last. So do that right away if you'd like a copy. And thank you all so much for this wonderful presentation. These will be from the NAACP.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Yes, thank you. So you all will send an email saying that you're interested in one of the cookbooks while the supplies last. So thank you so much. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you
It's
all.
awesome night.
Yes, thank you all for tuning in, and this has been great. And we'll have this up on YouTube, and you'll be able to view it again. Thank you very much.
Have a healthy life.
Yes.